Welcome back, everybody. We are back for another episode of the Broxton Digital Show. My name is Broxton Davis. I'm a performance media analyst at one of the largest advertising agencies in the world, as well as the host of the Broxton Digital Show, which is my podcast where I bring in seasoned marketing professionals, directors, vice presidents, C-suites, you name it, bringing them in and pretty much getting the industry secrets for students and young pros to be able to really figure out how to break into the industry and have a killer start to their career. Once again, I feel like I'm kind of getting repetitive here saying we have another awesome guest, but the guests just keep getting awesomer and awesomer.
Hmm.
This person has kind of a couple connections to me through some people I know. Next thing you know, we met, and it was pretty awesome for me to meet this person and get to chat. And now we're kind of getting to have this long form conversation. But pretty storied advertiser here. He's had a long career in marketing and advertising, bounced around to a lot of different legendary companies that we'll get into, all the way now to being the CMO at one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Hess.
Hey, Broxton. I
Hey,
am
Scott,
seasoned
thanks.
indeed. I am absolutely
Yes.
seasoned.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
I'm I'm happy to join you. It's funny you were saying that through different connections that we know each other, but I think one of the biggest things that I noticed right away that you did, which I know we're talking to young people about how to get ahead in this thing, is that we had a brief intersection that could have been nothing, and you made it into something. I know we could talk more about that, but it could have been we passed with a single sentence between the two of us and nothing more came of it. But you actually took the initiative to reach out to me. You discovered what a lot of young people discover is that old people are dying to talk to younger people and to share what we know and stuff like that. If we have any, one of our common bonds was Michigan State, which I see you flying the green today.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
but it doesn't take a lot. People that are farther along in their careers are usually thrilled to be able to share the things that we know with younger people who, to us, look just like us when we started our career. And most of us wish we had a lot more help than we had. So kudos to you for making more of it.
Well, that is awesome to hear, and I do think there's definitely a bit of a misconception there of that a lot of the older generation, kind of maybe has a negative, first impression on a lot of people from our generation and stuff. But yeah, I mean, just like you said, kind of just came in passing. Somebody mentioned my name to you. I just wanted to take the initiative. I was definitely intimidated, looking you up on LinkedIn, and this person totally could totally ignore me. They probably have a million things going on, but it never hurts to reach out. I reached out, and next thing we're sitting here recording an episode together. So just goes to show, if you take that initiative and really lean into the networking side of things, some pretty crazy things can turn out. I definitely didn't think I'd be interviewing a CMO, of your level at any point in the early stages of this show. So it's just been an awesome experience.
And the way I look at, I mean, you and I we just talked about life stuff. Like people in my role, I don't sit around thinking of myself as a CMO. I certainly think it's hilarious when I hear myself referred to as intimidating. So usually, not all the time, there's always stuffy older people that are really into their role and their stature and stuff. But most older people, we don't feel particularly scary. We even forget that we're old. We forget, like, I swear to God, when I look at you, I see two things. I see myself at your age, and I see my son. Another huge thing, an advantage that a young person has is that a lot of the old people that are in these senior things oftentimes have kids your age. And we've learned that everybody's somebody's son, and we always want people to be kind to our kids. So we're kind to other people's kids too.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just so awesome to hear. I'm happy, I'm reminding yourself a little bit of a younger Scott Hess, but also cool to hear too, because I think it just needs to be said more that people of your age and even people that are just in their career and doing cool stuff, they want to talk about it and they want to have their stories heard just as much as anybody else. So I think it's kind of on my generation to be the ones who have those conversations and extract that information, which is one of the reasons I started this show is because people like you, there's so much knowledge and value up in that head. But if nobody has those conversations and, hears those things that you have to say, it just kind of eventually disappears. You retire, careers end, and that kind of thing. So I just felt, very motivated that I needed to, get this information as on as large of a scale as I could.
I'd get it quick too, because I'm going to turn 60 in 3 weeks, and you don't know how much longer I'll even be around, Broxton.
For who knows, maybe one of the last interviews. How cool.
I almost was hit by a car. I just went and picked up lunch a couple blocks away, and I'm absent-minded, so this almost didn't happen. Had I been hit by the car, you would have been the interview that didn't happen. So I don't. I think last interview is better. Dear God, please let this not. I don't mind if it's my last interview, but just give me another 25 years to goof around on the planet. I hope.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, less interviews would definitely give you more time to do the goofing around. So,
Yes, sir.
but anyways, yeah. So just to kind of get started, I definitely want to just kind of give the listeners an idea of kind of how your story in advertising went. So to just kind of step back a little bit, how did things kind of get kicked off in the advertising and marketing space for Scott Hess?
So I went to college without any clue what I wanted to do. And someone told me I was good at arguing, so I should be a lawyer. So I started out poli sci, which I was told was a path into law, kind of a good pre-law major. Um, but my poli sci classes were fine. They were just okay. I was finding it hard to go to some of my classes. I took a class in creative writing, and not only did I find it easy to go, but I didn't want to miss the class. And I think it was for a couple reasons. Number one, we had some good professors at Miami University when I was there in that department. But number two, I had some talent and some enthusiasm for the subject. And so I would show up there with a pretty good attitude, do my work, and then someone would tell me that I was good. And so, for me at least, when I was 18, 19, 20, any amount of praise from somebody that didn't have to give it to me, that wasn't my parent or my uncle or aunt or whatever, that felt amazing. So I went to the writing classes, got praised, and I ended up switching. I briefly switched to philosophy, then I switched to creative writing and poetry. I graduated with a poetry degree, bad grades, just because really the only classes I was going to were my writing classes. I was like my physics class. I remember I took it pass fail, and I only went for the exams, and I somehow eked out a pass. Um, but I didn't understand, and I feel like people your age do get this better. I didn't get that I was going to have to get a job and pay for everything. So I graduated without a good plan. Worked for my mom at a TCBY yogurt store for a while. Um, Moved to Cincinnati and worked I painted houses. I worked at another TCPY. It took me a while. Finally, like 18 months after graduating, I ended up in Chicago. I had 200 bucks, and I took a job as a proofreader at a consulting firm, and that stuck for whatever reason. I was decent at being a proofreader, but the biggest thing that happened there was I found out that a combination of my personality, the talent I had for sort of proofreading and writing, um, made me stand out a little bit from the other people my age there. And so I did kind of what you did is at one point a more senior person gave me something to edit, and I said, listen, let me they gave it to me to proofread it, and I said, can I edit it? I would sort of rework some of these sections. Are you comfortable with that? Dude, I was literally 23, 23 and a half. I didn't know anything about anything, but I was pretty sure. I just had this sense that I could improve it, and I did. So then word started to get around that I was more than a proofreader. I could actually help edit and even write a few things. And a partner at Anderson Consulting said, will you give a copy edit to my technology vision speech? And this, literally when I'm 23 and this is a partner, the partners were the biggest deal in the world at Anderson Consulting. This is somebody that's 25, 30 years older than me, that has a ton of money, drives a great car, lives in a fancy house, goes to fancy house. Like they were somebody that was like, I don't know how you ever get to there. And they kind of said, they said, yeah, have at it. And I said, would you mind if I just rework this completely? Like I have a pretty cool idea for where this could go. So to be honest, I mostly threw out what they had done. And I came up with this thing that was called the Four Pillars of Technology, based on, I don't know, to this day, I almost wonder where it came from. I'd read some stuff. There was a little bit of stuff in his. So I wrote this thing, and all of a sudden, my profile changed at 23 and a half, from the loser proofreader sitting there with technical manuals to a guy that could actually be thoughtful and useful to the partners. So the biggest thing that happened there was, number one, I had a greater sense of what I was capable of. It was validated by somebody that was very senior and valued what I did. Um, and it changed everything about how I thought of my career. So I spent 6 years doing things like that at Anderson Consulting, and I figured out if I'm sort of creative and marketing oriented at Anderson Consulting, I'm not a mainline consultant. I'm not the way they make money. I'm part of the support team that helps them make money. Where can I take what I do, the skills that I have, and be a revenue creator, somebody that actually gets dollars in the door? So the arc of my career, I didn't get to advertising until 25 years ago, and I've been working 37, almost 38. But when I finally got to advertising, I was in a place where who I am and what I'm good at is what drives the business. So that was huge. And I think if you can make money come in the door, and if you can take care of the money, the client, whatever that thing is there, it just changes your whole value at the enterprise. So all of a sudden, I went from being a guy that sat in a creative services department that made not very much money and was a nice to have, but not central to the business. In advertising, I'm helping win big accounts. I'm helping take care of clients that are giving us millions and tens of millions and sometimes even hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's when my value and the value that I could create for the business got closer together, I got better roles, I made more money. Advertising, the reason that I knew I was in the right place with advertising when I eventually got to advertising is it was, I finally felt like I was with my people. I could dress the way I wanted to dress. I could talk about the concert I saw over the weekend, or I could talk about this new show that was on, like caring about culture and music and writing and wanting to dress kind of interesting and hip and urban and all that shit. That was where people like me were. They were not at the consulting firm where I had to wear a suit and where I had to talk about like, the new trends in telecommunications, which I didn't care about. But advertising was a place where who I am was valued, was central to the business. And so it was just so much easier for me to thrive there and for my career to thrive.
No, it's so cool, and I love kind of how you ended on that. Just finding your people piece. I think that's a super important thing that a lot of people don't realize. That's kind of the moment when you do find your people and get around, groups of people that you can really work with and thrive around. That kind of seems to be one of the moments in your career where things really start to skyrocket, and that can take some time too. It doesn't happen right away, is kind of what I've heard. And for you, it took decent amount of years, right?
Yeah, I think a big thing is when I started in business, LinkedIn didn't exist. Cell phones didn't exist. Frankly, when I started in business, the internet didn't exist. That came years after I started. And so when you'd get a job, it would take a while to figure out where else could I work? What other places like this are there? Who are the people that work there? What are the titles that they're hiring? Does it make, can I make more money than I make here? The job of building a network and then understanding the value of the network. I mean, it took 6 years for me to figure out here's a bunch of other places I could work in, and here are a few people I've met that could help me get there. My take is now the young people that start here, their LinkedIn goes, you start here and you have meetings with clients, you have meetings with marketing and um, advertising technology companies and partners that we work with. These kids at the end of their first year have hundreds of people on their LinkedIn. They're seeing a daily traffic of what's going on. They're seeing which companies are sort of obviously trying. You don't have to read the five different trades and meet a million people. Your LinkedIn on a daily basis gives you such a window into what's going on. It's very easy after a year to think of five places that you could go. That used to be hard. It used to be a major, like people would stay in. You got to, Broxton, imagine in 1989 when I start working, I go into the office and I sit in a cubicle, which nowadays we don't even have those, but I was in a cubicle with walls that were like this high. I did not have a laptop. In fact, initially I didn't have a computer. I did everything by hand. I marked stuff up with a pen on paper. Eventually I got a computer. That computer connected to a mainframe computer where I could access documents. It did not go to ESPN.com. It did not go to YouTube. It didn't go any my phone was mounted to my desk. It couldn't go anywhere with me. It had to be used in the cubicle and it could dial internally. If I put nine in to dial externally, like I wanted to check in with my buddy or my parents or whoever, I would have to log the purpose of that external call during work hours. So I got in at about 8 o'clock in the morning, went into my cube. The only times I would leave my cube were to get food, to have a cigarette, because back in the day I used to smoke cigarettes because I was fucking miserable in my cubicle. And, because it would give you an excuse to get up and leave. Um, it was a very different time. So you would just stay in there and you were in work mode with blinders on. Maybe you'd have a meeting, you'd walk over to a conference room, you go back to your cube, but it's so different. Remote work, if you were not in the office, you were invisible. The best thing in the world was if I could take a business trip. If I had to fly to LA, I would be off. I hope is swearing acceptable on the Broxton Digital
Sure.
Podcast?
Keep it a little family friendly, as much as possible, but we want to keep it real though too.
All right, I'll clean it up. So if you're flying to LA, by the time you get to the airport and you get from the air, again, no cell phone, I would be off the grid for a day. So if I had a trip to LA, and we didn't have laptops, I would read a novel, take naps, have two drinks on the plane, and the next day I would re-engage. I mean, when I was home at night without a laptop or a cell phone, I was untouchable, right? So, granted, that all changed as laptops came in and then cell phones came in. Anderson, we had an early pilot program. We got some of the first flip phones that were ever existed. We did a pilot thing, I think, with Motorola at the time. But work was very different and it was unbelievably isolating. So, I worked at a building called 69 West Washington, which is not too far from where I'm sitting right now. I was in my cubicle. It turned out I had a good friend from college who worked in the building across the street. I think he worked for a company called 9X at the time. Don't even think they exist. I don't even know what they did. I'm not sure he ever knew. We had a ritual at like 2 p.m. I would get up from my cube and walk to the window and put my hand on the window. He would get up from his cubicle across the street a couple floors down and put his hand on the window. And that was just a way of feeling any sort of human connection outside of the work that was on our desk. So, yeah, it took a while. I wish it didn't take so long, but it did. And I didn't understand even then how different it could feel. So I think a huge thing sometimes when you're young, you got to stick it out. You got to stay at a place for a year or 2 years and all that kind of stuff. But, but back then it felt like where the heck else are you going to go? At least you guys have a glimmer of hope sometimes. And I guess the thing I often tell younger people is if you have a sense that be wary of always jumping to the next good thing. Every place is broken in a unique way, but also don't spend 6 years someplace that you know is not your future. Stay there for as long as you need to learn some things and to learn what you're good at, what you're bad at, to learn what you don't want to do, what you do want to do, but then keep going. My favorite analogy for a career is it's like hitchhiking. And if we start out in Chicago and we got to get to Florida, don't take a ride to Wisconsin. That's going the wrong way. Don't head to Michigan if you want to go to Florida, but definitely take a ride to Ohio or Kentucky. Figure out the general direction that you want to head in, and any sort of any car that comes past that's taking you in that direction, jump in it. If you wait for somebody that's driving to the exact address in Miami that you want to end up in, that's going to take forever. So don't do that. Just keep moving to a better place.
No, that's such a great analogy. I've actually never heard that one before, and it does make a lot of sense, to jump on those opportunities, but also don't be always like searching and trying to jump ship and look for maybe, the wrong things, like only looking at salaries and things like that. Um,
I'm
but I
a
guess
big
too,
proponent of years. So what I often tell my mentees here is make a decision for a year. If every single day you're like, I don't know if I make enough money, I don't know if I'm in the right job, I don't know if I like my boss. It's just like a marriage. That's just no way to be married. It's no way to be in a job. So decide from April 21st, 2026 to April 21st, 2027, I'm going to do everything I can to make this awesome. And then in April of 2027, I'm going to raise my head up and look around for a week or two. And then I'll decide what I'm going to commit to. You can't every day wonder if you're doing the right thing. It's a hard way to live. So create a reasonable increment for you to put your head. If I'm your boss, Broxton, and I've just promoted you and given you a raise, I want you to stop worrying about what you should be doing and just get down to business. So I always tell these kids, put your head down, work like crazy, raise your head up at review time. That's the time to think, does this work for me?
I love that because it's like such a common thing now. I think it's like a day-to-day basis where some people, want to hop on LinkedIn and complain about the situation or complain about the hiring market. And that's really not going to help you, especially if you can't just get out of that mindset and actually accomplish some work. So I think you have a really good point there of like you need to set some increments of like, all right, regardless of what's going on for this 3 month period or these couple quarters, I'm putting my head down and I'm going to go and nothing's really going to interrupt me. But I think it's really important to what you're saying there of you need to set that time where hey, I'm going to pop my head up on my desk and check out what is going on because there's two kind of things you got to balance there, and neglecting one or the other is definitely not going to play out well for you as you kind of move through your career is what I think, at least. I'm not quite there yet.
Well, there's a really good TED talk. I think it's called Why 30 is Not the New 20. But it basically says that if you enter into any sort of a relationship or a commitment with one foot in and one foot out, I'm not sure if this is going to fit. It'll never be right. The only way to know whether or not you're marrying the right person is to be all in. Because if both of you feel like you're not sure, you're never going to know what it feels like to be committed. And I think it's the same in a job. Every single job that you have, especially at the beginning, you're going to feel like you made a mistake almost every single time. It's like, oh, it's exciting and there's new snacks and I met these people. But a few weeks in, you're going to be like, I don't know how to do anything. I don't know who I can trust. That's every new up role. So I do think it's critical to find out if something is for you. And this is a relationship, this is a job, this is a neighborhood that you move to, for God's sakes, is you go all in. This is my life. And then with that attitude, this is what this TED Talk says as well, you find it if it is. If you're constantly like, I don't know, you'll never know because you didn't give it your full effort.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to put it, and I definitely will obviously follow that advice and can definitely see the value. And you kind of have to commit to something to really see if you truly are meant for that moment or that situation. Because if you don't, just like you said, you'll never really know. You'll just spend, or you'll probably end up walking away saying, I guess I never know. I don't know. Um, I did want to ask you one thing though. So you mentioned, kind of knowing when it's maybe time to move or, poking your head up after you've spent a lot of time grinding and kind of seeing what's around. Now, as a young person, you're definitely going to be a little worried. I've been working so hard. I don't want to set myself back in my career. I definitely don't want to burn any bridges. You're probably pretty tight with your first couple managers. How do you kind of recommend navigating that type of situation as a young person when you have all those nerves kind of racking up on you and you're starting to worry about everything?
Hmm. I think usually the way we react to situations is less about the situation than it is about the story we tell ourselves about the situation. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that you've just started a new job and you think I need to give this a year, and you're a month into it and feels like a disaster. If the story you tell yourself is, I'm going to try and overcome this disaster. I'm going to learn how to communicate better with my boss. I don't have the skills that I thought I needed to do X, but they want me to do Y. Let me see if I can learn why. If you say, I've made a grave mistake, this sucks, and I've got to get out of here, that makes every day hell. If you say, I'm 23, I have so much to learn, maybe what need to learn is how to survive a real challenge where my boss stinks and the job isn't what I thought it was. I'm going to show up open every day and give it my all. If I fail, I fail. I think that so often when you said you talked about having nerves and all this kind of stuff. I'll give you a great. I really believe you set an intention, and the intention is when you like. I wake up in the morning, literally, Broxton, and I say, "This is like my little daily intention that I came up with that I do every day." Setting aside fear, shame, and guilt, because every day I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to be ashamed of something I did imperfectly, and I'm going to feel guilty for neglecting things. I set aside fear, shame, and guilt. I arise at peace. So I give myself that invocation of peace. Here I set aside the bad stuff. I arise at peace, ready to give and receive love. That's very soft. It's not hardcore business stuff. This is about my life. But that lets me know that what I'm trying to do today, the reason I want to be on this thing with you is I feel like I'm extending love in your direction, in the direction of anybody that might see this and might want to have some advice on their path. I feel great about doing this. But the other night I was going to play pickleball. I play about 4.0 level pickleball, and I wanted to play 4.5. And I think I'm okay with 4.5, but I've done it a few times and I've done okay. But a couple times I melted down because I thought all these kids were better than me. So I sat in the parking lot of the pickleball place as a 60-year-old man, or 60 and 3 weeks, and said, I am here to test myself. The people that are trying to beat me on this court are there to make me better. Um, if I fail, I will have learned something very valuable that I should stay at 4.0. If I succeed, I will be able to level up to 4.5 where I play. No matter what happens, tonight is a valuable experience. And this is goofy, but I celebrate my courage for not just staying at 4.0 where I know I mostly win and seeing what happens at 4.5. I went in there, I warmed up joyfully. It ended up, thank God, going really well. It was a little touch and go at the beginning. Three 25-year-olds, a 30-year-old, a 35-year-old, and me. And turned out I won more games than I lost. And I think I was the second or third best player there, which is great. But the bigger thing was that I didn't go in there insecure, scared, ready to get a message that I sucked, ready to get a message that I was old, ready to get a message that these people were mean and vicious and attacking. I went in there with a beautiful intention for how I wanted things to go. And guess what? Things went really well. So I think when you're young, things are happening quick. Oh my God, pressure. Am I doing this right? Like the biggest thing you learn as you get older is you start to learn a really small but important pause. And that pause is when you actually think, what am I doing here? What's my intention? What am I trying to get from this situation? Me, I'm entitled to have a need here. My boss wants X. My parents want X. What do I want? Okay. And who am I? So, what do I want and how do I show up? I show up ready to give and receive love. So, I shouldn't be a little baby if somebody calls a shot of mine that's questionable out. I shouldn't be a little baby if someone drills me in the chest that's better than me because I hit a fat shot up there. And I also know that I'm a generous, kind person and I want to show up as that person. If you have the intention, if you have if you have the awareness of who you are as a person, then a trigger is going to hit you. Your boss talks bad to you, something, a client gets all over your ass or whatever. But if you have that little micro pause of who am I and what am I doing this for, it enables you to react gracefully as opposed to impulsively. So one of the best ways you can know that you're in trouble is be aware of your body. Your brain, you relied on your brain. You went to Michigan State, you graduated, you got yourself to Michigan State, you went to Michigan State, you graduated, you got a job. Broxton's brain is awesome. Broxton needs to also live in his body, and his body will tell him Broxton feels uncomfortable. Stress is ramping up. Broxton is insecure. Broxton is afraid. Broxton is so full of himself that he feels like he needs a better up. When you feel a little unruddered in your body, that's the time when you need to say, I'm a good person. I'm trying to learn and grow. That's the reason I'm here. I can have faith in the fact that as long as I haven't gotten out of my power because somebody made me feel insecure, that sounds elaborate, but what happens as you get older, if you practice that, if you practice having an intention, if you practice showing up as the person that you want to be, it happens in an instant. Um, so when I was younger and I had a boss that stopped me on the way in the door as I had my coat on, and she was all over my butt all the time, and she stopped me before I could get to my cube and said, "Where's that thing? I thought you were going to turn it in." I lost my flipping mind. I took my backpack off. I slung it over her shoulder across the room onto my desk, and I said, "Can you just let me get to my desk?" So I didn't have the ability at that time to slow down, to recognize the feeling that I was having was a sign that I needed the pause. So I don't know if this is making sense. I don't know if I've talked about it exactly this way before, but um, the biggest thing you can do is practice in advance. Who am I? How do I want to respond to the situation? What is in it for me? If my boss is disappointed in me for something, that's up to him. If I've shown up and given a good effort and I know what I'm doing, then it doesn't hurt as much.
No, that's a great way to put it, and I think that like you made a great point there about being intentional about practicing it too. Like it's not just something you can flip on when it's time to move to the next position. If it's something you're constantly practicing and understanding yourself, then it kind of just happens naturally, like you said. I think another really important part there too is just the fact that like these things are definitely going to happen when you're at an early point in your career where you're going to have to move around and anxiety is going to be high. But what you were saying just kind of leans in on something that I've really been trying to, utilize in my career and even just my day to day, whether it's talking to my parents, talking to my girlfriend, talking to somebody at work, is to just always think through things logically before I let my emotions take over and start getting all this doubt or anger or whatever it may be creeping in. If you can just, like you said, take that pause and recognize, like, hey, what's going on here? Let me think about this logically. How would somebody that isn't emotionally tied to this situation respond or, go about this the right way? Then things seem to go a lot smoother. And it can be hard to do when you're young. You have a lot of emotions. You're definitely trying to prove yourself, trying to bring the best ideas to the table, but being able to control it just kind of seems like a cheat code. And it's definitely something that you want to lean in on and develop even as, grow in your career.
I think that it's important to feel emotions, and like I do therapy every week. I just did it earlier today. Every single week I do therapy. I love it. It's great. And one of the biggest things I do there is I slow down and feel my feelings and all that stuff. But at the same time, when I'm in a work situation or even when a situation at home when the stakes seem to get higher, one of the things I've learned is that if I get that flush of excitement or adrenaline or whatever, I think, what if emotion didn't play a role here? What if I was cold? What would I do? It's like, oh, well, you just do this because it's the obvious thing to do. And I think like, okay, um, in times where the stakes are raised, if you're able to get to a place where, what I find interesting is I'm probably more emotional when it doesn't mean anything, because I know that when something is very important and meaningful, when it affects my family, when it affects my career, my that's when I got to get cold. And it happens almost automatically now. And it sounds weird, get cold, but it's where I'm like, what is the I know what the right thing is to do here. When your emotions and your anxiety kick in when you feel like something is at stake. And I think one thing that happens as you get older is you realize nothing really fundamental is at stake most of the time. Most of the time, the fact that my boss is disappointed in me at the moment or my client is mad at me or whatever, it's not existential. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get fired. I mean, there might be moments where but generally, we react, we catastrophize, we think it's not so bad that my boss is frustrated with me. I can live with that. So what, he's frustrated. Sit over there and be frustrated. He's in the room right now. He's probably frustrated with me for something. It's when I catastrophize, I get ahead of myself and I think I might lose my job. Well, if I lose my job, then how are we going to retire? Well, if I can't retire, I got to keep doing this. If I keep doing this, my health is going to. It's when you spiral ahead or backwards that you feel uncomfortable. In the moment, if my boss is a little disappointed in me, and if I can just stay with that, that doesn't hurt that bad. So what? He'll be happy with me in an hour if I just stay here and focus. I think the tendency most of us have is to either go into the past to try and fix it or go into the future to try and head off disaster. Most of the time, grace, and the way that I like to use the term, exists in the present. When you think, what's the next thing I could do that will put me back in a position where I'm in my body, in my power, and operating with the kind of cold detachment that's appropriate for the situation? Doesn't mean you're a cold detached person. It just means that a situation has arisen where that's the best way to show up.
No, that's a great way to put it. And I think like, yes, it kind of sounds a little harsh, being cold and detached, but sometimes that's, where you need to make those serious decisions, but also being able to recognize, when there isn't anything fundamentally on the line, maybe don't be that cold and detached person. Um, I do kind of want to switch gears a little bit now.
Sure.
I know, you're operating at a super high level now, making some really big decisions and in some super important rooms around some super important conversations. Now, I think people who listen to this kind of content and, are interested in hearing from people like you are probably going to be the people in those rooms later on in their life. They're clearly going above and beyond to try to educate themselves and clearly, want to be like the people they're listening to. So, to those students or maybe young professionals who are maybe doing the overachieving and standing out amongst their peers, what's something that maybe when you were at that point that you could have done that, would have got you to where you're at a little bit faster and easier?
Well, I definitely did some of what you mentioned early in the podcast around. I would tend to put older people on a pedestal a little bit and think, why should they bother to talk to me? um, Something about their education or the way that they were raised or the people that they had in their network. I felt that there was probably something better about other people that I didn't intrinsically have. And the older I've gotten, the more I realize, yeah, no, that was never true. So I think the first thing I always tell young people when I do like little workshops sometimes for our associates, and I say one of the things I tell them is talk to a bunch of old people. They're dying to talk to you. So we talked about that at the beginning is demystify older people and talk to them. Most of the older people, I don't sit there and look at you and think, oh, young Broxton, he's this many years. Like after a few days of us showing up in the same building and walking the same hallways, you're just another guy at work. You might be thinking, there's the old guy, there's the C title, there's the whatever. I don't think that. I think there's Broxton. So I think demystify the older people. I think that's a huge one. I think another big one for people that want to get ahead is I used to wait for a senior person to like look at me, figure out what I was good at, and then create an opportunity for me. And then I realized those senior people are busy. So I think a big thing is figure out what it is you want, whether it's an opportunity, a title, money. What is it that would make you happy in your job and deliver value for the company? And go ask for it. I think younger people a lot of times are waiting. When will I get a promotion? Or I wish I worked in investment. Now I work in strategy. Or I'd like to be on the content team, but I don't even know how to get there. Go to your boss or go to whoever leads the content team. Go to somebody that might be able to grant your request and say, I've thought a lot about this. This is something that would be good for me. This is something that would be good for the company. I would like to do that by May. Is that possible? I've had that happen in my career several times where after a friend of mine taught it to me, I started to actually think about what I wanted and to go ask for it. And what I learned was most of the time, and this, by the way, works in marriage too, most of the time, people want to give it to you. Most of the time, they're like, oh, okay. So advocating for yourself like that, asking for what you want is critical. But there have been times where I've not been able to get what I wanted. And that's when I know this is probably not a great long, this is a place now that I'm going to make some money while I figure out where there's somebody that can give me what I want. Um, I think that when you're young, the wish that somebody is going to figure out the best fit for Broxton in the world professionally, at least for me, I always thought, I don't know, somebody's going to see me and pull me. It happens a little bit, but mostly you have to be your own best advocate and you have to figure out where do you want to go and how am I going to get there? And you can ask people very directly, but you're going to have to be the one asking instead of waiting for somebody to be like, Broxton, I've noticed you and I'm now going to move you into this great role. As long as you're doing your job and not causing any trouble, they're going to leave you there.
No, it's a great point, and I'm so happy you framed it up the way you did because a lot of people who maybe overachieved in high school or maybe overachieved in college, you get that kind of recognition, and you're at a much smaller scale. You're in a classroom of 30 people. Obviously, your professor's going to notice your good work, but you get out in the world and kind of realize how many people are out doing this, and how many superstars there are out there, and how many young, hungry people are there out there as well. And you're just another fish in the pool at that point. And I think it's a great point that you have to advocate for yourself. You can't just sit there and hope that, hey, I hope my manager is going to, get this work moved up the chain so people see it. It may never happen. Your manager is probably worrying about getting themselves promoted. So I think that's a great point.
I want to throw a couple things on top of that too, maybe three things, which is that here's something I tell young people all the time that took me several years to figure out. I wish I figured out more quickly. Depending on the business you're in, this mostly would apply, which is make somebody senior to you and frankly, senior to your boss. Look around the place where you are. There's some important people there. They they might be the founder, they might be the C-suite, they might be somebody that handles the biggest client relationship or is the biggest producer of new business. Look around, find people that have the power at the place where you are. They're often connected to revenue. Meet them, get them to know you. Somebody way senior to you at your place, get them to fall in love with you because those are the people that can help you. If your boss is 2 years older than you, it's great that they like you, but don't be afraid when you're at the. I love it when I'm in the kitchen and somebody wants to talk to me and asks me for 15 minutes or so. Get somebody senior to you to love you, ideally much more senior to you when you're young. Get a client or whoever it is that has revenue, that creates revenue, that is paying your business and is important to the to those that senior person that I told you that needs to fall in love with you. If they know that a client also loves you, even if you're in a support role, get somebody that creates revenue for the business internally and externally to be like, Broxton is my guy. And this is the key thing not to neglect. So you need a senior person, you need a client. If you have both of those, you're pretty well protected. You're unlikely to get fired if there's a like if your boss is like, Broxton's kind of a jerk, but I know that Tammy in the corner office thinks he's awesome. All right, I got bigger fish to fry than to mess with Broxton. Also, our client loves Broxton. But then here's the thing you have to remember that's critical. You also need your peers to love you. So if you're the kind of kiss ass that gets senior people and clients to love you, but you neglect your peers because you think you're better than them, that will bite you in the ass eventually. So it's you work three different relationships in the office. You help your peers. You show up for them. You cover their butt when they screw up. You offer to help them when they're slammed. You get the senior person to notice you and be in your corner, and you get a client. Dude, you are golden. You're golden. You are bulletproof. I wish I would have recognized the value of that more quickly. But now, even now at 60, with a great title and a 14-year relationship with my boss who runs the place, I always think any way that clients could value me more, any way that the other C-suite people could value me more, any way that I make sure that I'm looking around the office for peers or people junior to me that they think this guy is helping me. He's not just out for himself. It changes everything. Then they're like, if my job has a couple times become somewhat obsolete here. They're not thinking like the job's obsolete, let's get rid of Scott. They're like, frick, we love this guy. The client will be sad if he goes. The senior person will be sad if he goes. His colleagues all love him. Where else can we have? So I think if you find a way to cover off those three bases, you're just not going to get fired. And in fact, you're going to be the first person they think of when there's an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to spin it too. Is not only will you not be the one getting fired, you'll also be the person to, when your job does come obsolete, be somebody that they're looking to move up and say like let's find somewhere to keep this person who clearly is, providing so much value and has these awesome relationships that they fostered in the workplace.
And show up as a person, don't show up as an employee or a worker. You're not your title. You're actually a dude. You went to Michigan State. You love what you like. Share yourself and let other people share themselves. Find out where they went to college. If your boss has kids, you love their kids. I'm telling you. Like, um, um, recognize that these people that show up there have all kinds of things that are important to them. It could be their church, their mosque, their temple. It could be their extended family. It could be their aunt's charity. It could be, it might be their alma mater that's just making a deep run into the Sweet 16 for the first time in 30 years. Care about that stuff. And also don't network with people to figure out value exchanges for Broxton does this, so I could do this. Forge real relationships. If you have real relationships with 50% fewer people, that's so much more valuable than twice as many people that you have a superficial relationship with.
Yeah, I mean that is
Also,
just
it's
some
more fun.
Yeah, I mean that's the cherry on top right there. I mean that is just some convicting stuff, Scott. I mean it's pretty crazy. This episode. I say this every time, but especially this one. I've just learned so much just having these long form conversations. You don't get to sit down and chat with somebody for an hour when you schedule a coffee chat. So just getting to hear, the way you think, the way you've kind of done things throughout your life, is just super cool to hear. And I think it's so awesome how raw you've kind of been on this show and just like providing real, authentic insights of like, hey, this is where I messed up. Here's how you can do it better. You're laying it all out for us. Now, I know we are coming up on some time here, so I do want to get this final question in for you.
Sure.
This is one that I asked to everybody, kind of the closing question of the show. Something I asked in college during a lot of coffee chats that I got a ton of value from, and just continue to try to ask it. But with this though, so just try to close your eyes for a second, go back and picture that 20 to 22-year-old Scott Hess. he's sitting there, or maybe, a little bit older when you broke into advertising, but just breaking in, super young, motivated, hungry to get in, but also, super ignorant. You just don't really know how things go, but you're so motivated and you are really dang sure that you can figure it out. And now, obviously, sitting here in the C-suite as a CMO, what could 20 to 22-year-old Scott have done different that would have made things better, and kind of how would that have changed things now?
So the younger Scott was just terrified because I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford my life. I didn't, I just felt like I did not know how to become an adult. I couldn't see a clear path. I was a poetry major with a 2.5 GPA. Then I was a proofreader after I was a house painter and a yogurt store manager. Like, there was nothing about my story that led to being a successful 60-year-old guy living in Chicago at the health club that I thought only the coolest, richest people could go to, and with kids that were like, there was no signpost that said I was going to be okay. And that really hurt. And it made me anxious. And smoked cigarettes and I drank too much and I agonized. And so one of the biggest things that I try and tell young people is you don't have to see the whole path. You do not have to know how the story ends. But one thing you could do that would make it a lot easier on yourself is I'm not religious, but I have a lot of language that sounds like religion. I talk about grace, I talk about faith. You need to have some kind of faith that if you show up and you stay with it, that you made it this far, you made it through high school, you made it to college, maybe you have your first job, like you said, I'm 22 or something like that. Stick with it. You have made it this far for one reason or another. Don't I think what I did so often was I questioned everything and I doubted and it compounded my suffering. At a certain point, and it took a while, I started to believe, I don't know how I'm going to succeed, but I'm going to succeed. I wish I had started that more early. I wish I would have at the end of the day said, I don't know how today is in service of my larger goals, but I believe that if each day I show up like this, over time it's going to it did. It's just when you're younger, you go from kindergarten to first grade to second grade. You and I talked about some of this before. There's all these increments of progress. When college ends, you go from you're gonna go from first grade to second. You have to really screw up to not. But when college ends, it's like the escalator you were on stops moving. At which point you have to step. You have to make the choice to make steps. You have to keep going. And I think doing that from a position of hopefulness as opposed to hopelessness is a lot more pleasant. I just always tell kids you're going to be okay. The dumbest goofballs from your freshman corridor find lives. They do. The people in your classes that were terrified to speak, that sat in the back, and people do find their way, but it doesn't happen the way it did when you're younger. Each year things get better. It's going to be a series of steps. And when you actually take authorship, figure out what you want, ask for what you want. I just wish I would have skipped the many years, at least a decade of I don't know what I'm doing, it's wrong, and really condemning myself and saying you're an idiot and you can't. You have to have self-belief in the face of big odds. There's not a single person that accomplishes anything in their life that doesn't operate out of with a little bit of delusion and say, I'm going to make it. I don't know how. Just believe you're going to make it. You don't have to know how. Go to bed at night praising yourself for everything that you did right and be ready to forget all the things that you did wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that really just sums it up. I think, like, one big point there was just that, just wake up and do the daily inputs and have that belief that if I keep doing these daily inputs, this greater goal is going to happen. And that can be kind of how you use your mind. Cause I found myself there plenty of times where, you're sitting in that new role, or even, something outside of work, and you're like, am I in the right place at all? Or could I be doing things completely different? And when you're young and there's so many different options, it's so easy to. So that's just super refreshing to hear, and some really killer advice. But Scott, thank you again for coming on. That kind of wraps up all the questions I had. I don't want to keep you for too much of your time. I want to be respectful here. I know that people can find you as Scott Hess on LinkedIn. Anywhere else people should look to find you or your content or anything?
I write a Substack that I really enjoy doing. So if you go to Substack and search on me, it's God, I made such a crazy title for it. I can't remember. Divine Particles of the Infinite Sun, I think it's called. But just look under Scott Hess. I write a lot about life and what I'm thinking about. They're usually pretty quick. I love to think they're insightful. So if anybody's interested in that kind of thing, and I do write a lot about LinkedIn. I do write a lot on LinkedIn about career stuff because I feel like I have a good vantage point now. So glad we spent time together. Glad that you took the initiative to reach out. Glad you have the drive and confidence to make sure this happened, to follow up with me, to make sure I was going to show up, to prepare in the way that you did. Everything you're doing is the right stuff to do. So you're modeling how to keep moving.
Heck yeah, Scott. Well, that is so awesome to hear. Thank you so much for the kind words. And just thanks again for making the time to come on today. It really means a lot. And I hope everybody who's listening has a lot of great takeaways and insights. I think you could probably take the last 50 minutes, break it down, and pretty much have the layout for how to have a pretty crazy career. So I would definitely recommend doing that. But thank you again, Scott. It was great chatting with you. And, cheers to the next one.
Thanks a lot, Proxy.
Yes, sir.